As people on the DFS team know, I like to do some storytelling, and I use as many metaphors as I possibly can. Um, One of the things that I think is really important is, we're all on our journey. And our journey is not only what is about work. So when I think about sort of leadership and effectiveness and teamwork, I really think that it's more about who we are as people and how we show up in the places that we occupy. And I also believe that that when we are talking about sort of building effectiveness in the things that we do, that if it only relates to work, then it's not going to work. Um, so I think it's helpful when the lessons that I learn about effectiveness, leadership, and management permeate sort of all domains of life. And so that I'm not just a better professional, I don't just show up better at work, but that I actually show up as a better person in my life. And as Robin mentioned, I'm currently the director of the Department of Family Services. I identify professionally as a social worker, even though I am also an educator and an administrator. But on the personal side, I have so many other roles that I think are so much more important than what I do at work. And it's sort of in the order of how it happened. So I'm a brother, I'm an uncle, a husband, a pet parent, as well as a foster parent. And I need to be as effective in those roles as I am at work. And so I'm constantly looking for sort of things that help me be sort of better, to be more attentive, to be more present. And I'm just in sharing with you, I'm also sharing, those are my dogs. Those are Chip and Dale. Chip is the big one, Dale is the small one. And I have had them, and we have been pet parents for 10 years. And I learn a lot of lessons from them. And I think that the lessons that we learn about the world and the world around us really help us sort of make meaning in life. And I'll say that there are three sort of fundamental things that I'd like to sort of start with. One is that first, we are all leaders. Leadership exists in all levels in an organization and in all people. Second, that there are golden lessons of leadership and effectiveness all around us that help us navigate our world. And third, these lessons we pick up intentionally by going to trainings like this, or reading books, or haphazardly, like we bump into things on our life journey. And so as I was thinking about this presentation, and sort of using the metaphor or the allegory of geese are constantly on a journey. So one of the things I thought I'd start with is what has been my journey. And Robin so clearly sort of articulated sort of where I started and where I am now. I've worked in a lot of different types of organizations. Early in my career, I was in public and private child welfare services as a caseworker, then a supervisor. But I learned that work was exhausting. And I decided that, I needed to take a break from that. And I ended up working in mental health and juvenile justice, working with victims and perpetrators of sexual violence. But I also then realized that I wanted to do something different. And I became the director of social work for Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, where I was predominantly overseeing like infectious disease social work as a healthcare administrator. One of the things that I think that has happened on my journey is that I've learned to recognize when I need a break, or when I need a change, or when I'm tired. And a lot of that has to do with when I think I'm no longer being effective in my role. Or if I don't believe that I can make the changes that are necessary. I also recognize that people don't necessarily know what I do. As a formal leader in a system, I get asked a lot by staff and by even my friends and family, and I say, like, what do you do all day? And I realized that I don't do a good job of telling my own story to folks because people sometimes think that all I do is I sit in my office and tell people what to do. But my day-to-day sort of things are far from it. I have been in and out of state and local governments in 3 different jurisdictions. In the state of Maryland, I oversaw private child welfare for the entire state. I was also the deputy director of Baltimore City Department of Social Services. I left and went to North Carolina. Um, my journey took me there, where I started as the director of social services for a large county in North Carolina and then became the assistant secretary for human services, overseeing all of social services and aging services for the state of North Carolina. And now I'm here. And I feel like I've learned so many lessons in each place, in every organization that I've been. I feel like I've learned the value of communication. I've learned what my buttons are and how to manage them. I've learned sort of the value of humility and personal agency, the ability to make my own choices. I've learned lessons about what it really means to manage. I have lots of sayings. One of the things that I say, and I say it a lot, and I even said it yesterday, is that we don't, as leaders, we don't manage people. People have personal agency. People govern themselves. And my job as a leader is to manage sort of the workflow, the business process, making sure that resources are available to the team members. And one of the most valuable lessons I think I've learned is the distinction between understanding and agreeing. Because a lot of times we end up in places where we're in conflict or in disagreement with folks, but what we at the base of that is really understanding. But at the base of that is is it that we disagree or that we misunderstand what's happening in our environment? And so one of the things that I think is really important is that even in situations that are not the best, if we walk away from significant engagements, sort of work experiences or personal experiences, if we walk away from those experiences without having learned a lesson that catapults us into our next thing, then I think we're doing a disservice to ourselves. And so when I thought about this talk, I really started to think about like what's in my environment that has taught me some lessons. And there are often geese around the Panino building. We're often stepping in their mess. They don't necessarily seem to fear us. And I recalled sort of this idea of that we learn and can learn things from geese. So in this world around me, and as I've been on my journey, as I'm like walking outside, sort of I've encountered geese. I'm sure you have too. And sometimes we know that they're not the nicest of birds. A lot of people don't like them. There are efforts in local governments to sort of eradicate sort of them from certain places. They get loud. They don't seem to really care about people. But my experience with geese is not just sort of in general, like seeing them, because as I mentioned that on my life's journey, I tried to observe the things around me and learn a little bit more about them. And so I mentioned that Chip and Dale, Chip is 10 and Dale is 5. So probably about 6 years ago, my husband and I, we went to a park in North Carolina, in Durham. We went to a lake. We go to a lake periodically, and there was a gaggle of geese. This flock of geese had landed, and my dog Chip he's very fun, very friendly, but he's very large, and people don't necessarily find him as loving as he really is. Like you see him, people get scared. He's about 100 pounds, and so we get to the park, we're sitting at a picnic table. We were generally out of the sight of these geese and most people. I decided to go for a short walk because I wanted to take him down to the lake. And I wanted to see if there were other dogs because sometimes Chip back then, and even now, could be a little bit much. Not seeing any, I took him to the water. But one of the things I noticed that when it was just me walking around, the geese didn't necessarily care. Like they just went on about their lives. The geese had no problem. But when I brought Chip out, several of the geese started honking. More of them started flapping their wings in the water, and those that were on the land actually started to move. And so what I began to really realize, and I went home and did some reading about geese, and as I later began to understand that some of these geese, for the sake of the group, were signaling danger, that they were choosing to communicate that there was a predator around them. And for some reason, they didn't see people as a predator, but the dog definitely was a predator. And for them, it was time to sort of move along. And so some of them were flying a little bit further down the lake. Some of them were going into the water. They were doing whatever they could do to sort of get away from me and my dog. So, the study of animal behavior is a huge field called ethology, and it is in this branch of science that that we find ourselves in this discussion today. And what I learned is that geese, like people, they're creatures of habit. They travel. They have migratory patterns that don't change. That they have a common goal. They support each other. They communicate with each other, and they have very specific roles and responsibilities, and they function as a team. And in our personal lives and in professional spaces, don't we, in the teams that we're on, have goals and common interest? Don't we take the opportunity to support each other so that we can succeed? Don't we value effective communication? Don't we recognize sort of the roles and the responsibilities that we and each other on our teams actually have? And we do this, especially at work in the context of teams, units, and programs, and the departments that we work in. We definitely sort of value sort of these things. So often we are talking about all I need is just a little bit better communication from my supervisor, or I wish that they would just tell us what's going on. That's because we value effective communication. There are, I like to think that I am sometimes, and especially in my past, even though I had a former role as a leader, one of the things that I always wanted to be seen as was a member of the team. And we talk about lessons. One of the lessons that I learned from a colleague who was doing some coaching, she said, Michael, you can be a member of the team, but this team needs a leader. They need someone that's going to sort of take us in the direction that we're going in so that we can be effective and provide the best services that we can to the children and families of the department. That was when I was in Baltimore City. And it dawned on me that for as much as I wanted to be seen as part of the team, nobody saw me as part of the team. They saw me as the person in charge. That was a lesson that I had to learn, and I think is relevant later in this conversation. I think, I took some time and I looked at the mission and vision of several departments across the county. And everyone I looked at, every department has a mission that focuses on effective service delivery to the citizens of the county, one way or another. It doesn't matter if you work in tax administration, JDRDC, or DFS, NCS, that we're all focused some way, somehow on ensuring that our citizens are getting what they need from us, and so that we are a much more well-oiled community. And so I believe it is our duty, while our journey has led us here, that we put into practice lessons that make us more effective. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to take a look at some, not all, because there's a lot of different lessons that we can learn from Geese. I'm going to probably take another 10 or 15 minutes, and I would really like to end with a conversation or questions about what I'm talking about, or things that are on your mind about journeys, about leadership, about teamwork, about effectiveness. And so I'm going to hop right in. So I'm near certain that almost all of us have seen geese flying together in a V formation, right? Studies have shown that flying this way and using this kind of teamwork for geese had 71% more flying range for geese flying in a V formation than if they were flying on their own. And as each bird flaps its wings, it creates an uplift for the birds that are behind them, and it reduces sort of like the air friction for birds that follow. So the load is a little bit lighter for every bird a little bit further down the line. I think, in this lesson, when we share a common goal and direction, we can get where we're going much faster and much more efficiently because we benefit from the momentum of the group. I think we've all had experiences of being part of a team and having a task to complete. Every one of us. Every one of us is in some sort of unit or team. We all have a sense of what teamwork is. We know what it feels like when our team is working together and everybody is putting their best foot forward and sort of creating that uplift for the team so that when the work comes, that we're all doing the things that we are supposed to do, that we are benefiting from the skills and the capacities and the competencies of our team. And so one of the first lessons that Geese sort of teach us that I'm presenting here is that when we share common goal and direction, that we can get there much faster and much more efficiently. Sorry. Our geese, when you see them in the sky, they tend to always be in that V formation. They stay in formation. When a goose when a goose falls out of formation, it suddenly starts feeling that drag and resistance of flying alone. They no longer have that benefit of that uplift and quickly tries to get back into that V formation. Because that formation not only makes it better for the birds to fly, but it also sort of increases the visibility of those geese. The lesson in here is that synergy can't be created working in isolation. It's so important that we stick together, that when we stick together, our teams develop a sense of community that emerges from this willingness to work together, working on that common goal. Not only is this collective work breeding greater efficiency, but together you have greater visibility of the common goal. Robin mentioned that there was this sort of ask of team members to sort of highlight sort of their leaders, highlight people in their organizations that are that support them, that are doing well, right? Creating greater visibility because those people have definitely centered sort of themselves on the common goal. And it's important that when we're all doing better, when we do better, that others take notice of the sort of well-functioning teams. And so it's often important that what geese tell us, I think, is that we need to bring our best to our team. And in doing so, the team becomes a community and generates greater success, more than any one single member can do by themselves. One of the things I found most interesting is this idea that geese stand by their flock in good times and bad times. When a goose gets sick or is wounded, 2 other geese drop out of formation, land with that goose, and follow it and help protect it until it can either get better and fly again or die. That's what it says, or they die. But when that goose is better, they launch back up and try to find their flock, or they catch up with another. The lesson here is that we should stand by each other in difficult times. It's always easy to be part of a winning team, but when it gets difficult, when it really gets difficult, that's when we as a team become much more relevant. Sometimes members of our teams may not be operating at the expected level. Every one of us, we all get sick. We have bad days. We have arguments in the morning with members of our family. We didn't get something done that we should have gotten done. And sometimes we just need to have our focus on issues that are critically important in other life domains. It's helpful when we are checking in on our team members, recognizing when they're not operating at optimal levels, provide some grace and flexibility, and support them and support each other during down times. And I'm certain that there's at least one person in this room who's complained about a team member who's not pulling their weight, only to learn later that that person's been dealing with something substantially difficult. It's in these times that the power and the value of the team is needed most. I know that there's at least one because I will take sort of accountability for being that person, for being the person who's like, well, why can't he just, and realizing later that they're worried about a sick relative or they were in the ER with their kid the night before. No, that's why they weren't on time, right? Um, you know, one of the things, I was trying to think of an example, and working in social services and sexual violence and foster care, and we have really intense examples. And but I'm going to give this one because I think it's so relevant of what it means to support your team member. When I was working in Durham, we had a staff person that we had learned we believed was sleeping in the office. And so we started looking at not only that person's building access pattern, but we were also looking at everybody else's building access pattern. And we noticed that there was a woman who was always coming to work at between 4 and 5 a.m. 4 and 5 a.m. Our business didn't open until 8:30. And so we went to her. I had her supervisor go to her, and we were like, why are you coming to work so early? Traffic is nowhere near as bad in North Carolina as it is here. And I said to her, and they said to her, you can't come to work that early. There's no work here. What are you doing? And what she said was that she comes to work early because she wanted to leave the house before her husband woke up because he was violent against her. And it was in that moment when my staff communicated that with me that I realized that, sometimes at work, our team members are dealing with things that we have no idea, yet they show up at their best, the best that they can be. And sometimes they need a little bit more help. I wish I could say that that was the first and only time that I've had situations like that come up, but it is not. We worked with her. We and we supported her, surrounded her, made sure she had access to resources. She managed her personal life the way that she could manage it, but just the idea of knowing allowed us to understand a little bit more. Thank you so much, empathy, that we were able to understand why she might be tired at work, why she might be not doing her best. And what is the job of a leader? But to understand and to support and uplift sort of these folks. We need to stand by our flock. We need to stand by our team members in a short, through the good and the bad. And so often in leadership, remember, leadership exists at all levels, right? In good times, we're all cheers. And in bad times, we're all pointing fingers. So many times we are pointing fingers. And so one of the things we talk about at DFS, and it is so easy to say, and it is so hard to operationalize, especially in large organizations, that one of the things that we have to do is give grace, give flexibility, and we also need to get to know our coworkers so that when they're not operating at our best, that we don't make the assumptions, that we learn how to approach, that we learn how to ask questions, that we learn to understand what does support mean to that person at that particular time. Sometimes it's a listening ear. Sometimes it is taking an opportunity to sort of be a thinking partner. And sometimes it is just stay out of the way and let that person focus. So the next lesson, communication is so key. And it's also a word that I don't necessarily like. I don't like the word communication. I don't like communicating about communication. I'm so sorry. Because if Robin says to me, Michael, I want you to communicate with your team a little bit better about professional development, I have no idea what that means, right? I want to give more specificity to sort of this idea of communication. Like when I think about it, so at DFS, some will say that I over communicate, like I tell the story. I give a no and why. I give a yes and why. I give a maybe and why. It's very rarely sort of, this is the way that it is. Very rarely do we use that. Geese have a large repertoire of honks to communicate with one another, including the we're on the ground, let's go, ship is coming, that dog is coming, we gotta go. So there's a honk for that signals the flock to take flight. And then while they are in the air, there's another one that says keep going. That this encourages those in the front to keep up the pace. There's nothing like a little encouragement, right? And I was thinking about this, someone said to me yesterday at the end of a meeting, it's lonely at the top. It's lonely when you are the formal leader and everybody works sort of under you. And I said, yeah, it really is. But I will tell you, I send out lots of emails to my team. I am so thrilled when somebody says, hey, thank you so much. I don't need it, but I'm thrilled when somebody says, that was exactly what I needed. I'm so glad you sent that out. And it's not to feed my ego more than it is to be able to say, thank you for doing that. Please do that. Do more of that. Do that again when it's necessary. It's encouraging, right? Because it tells me that what I put out there was valued. Please do it again. As opposed to, man, was that important? Did people really get that? And so I do some check-ins, like, did that really say what was it needed to say? And so even for a person who has formal leadership, it is so helpful to have some sense of encouragement, from peers. I think I saw Matt Thompson sort of on there. Matt has let me know, and he didn't know that he appreciates some of the work that I've been doing over at DFS by asking questions about what has happened. There's so many ways that we can communicate our encouragement and our appreciation for others. It's so easy for us to remember the dangers and the downfalls, but being focused. But because we're often so often focused in this very fast-paced environment of getting things done that pace can sometimes hinder moments of recognition. But it doesn't cost much to say thank you, or wow, that was great, or I appreciate that. And I'm not saying, believe me, I am nowhere near saying I'm perfect at this. I'm certain that I could do more of that. 100% certain, because this type of encouragement is vital to keeping teams motivated. And I'll say, I'm going to commit to making more effort to being sort of more thoughtful about communicating and encouraging. One of the other things that I think is really important, thank you, Constance, is that geese rotate roles, and they also encourage and empower. So when the lead goose, for that goose that's in front at the front of that V formation, it's exhausting, right? He doesn't have the benefit, or she doesn't have the benefit, or it doesn't have the benefit of getting that uplift from those in front of him, because there's no other geese in front of him. And so when the lead goose in the V formation gets tired, you know what it does? It moves. And it goes back into the general formation, and it lets another goose take the lead. This allows that goose to rest, but it also has the byproduct or the intention of allowing others to shine, to allow others to take the lead, to allow others to sort of help maintain the direction of the organization, of the team, of the flock. We shouldn't only be, the lesson here that I think is that we should not only be able to admit when we need help, but we should also work to empower those around us to take the lead. That everyone has different skills, different competencies, different capabilities, and sharing the work gives others a chance to shine. And I'll be the first person to say, and I'm certain there are some folks from DFS on here, I have a sense of where I want to go. What a lot of people don't know is in our senior management team, I am constantly asking the question, what do people need to hear? Is this the right direction? and being critically thoughtful of, is this the right thing to be doing right now? How does this align with? Because if it was the Michael Becketts Department of Family Services, it'd be remarkably different. But this belongs to Fairfax County. This belongs to the citizens of Fairfax County. And we have a mission that is steeped deep in federal, state, and local policy. Sharing this work is so important, right? Because I will say this, if it's all about me when I go, because one day I will go, great things will happen. Maybe I'll hit the lottery. Maybe I'll retire. At some point, we all will be gone, right? What I really appreciate is when the systems that have been set up sustain beyond formal leadership because we have gotten the buy-in of sort of like the bigger organization, right? And we do that by allowing others to influence the work that we do. And I'll say, when I got to DFS, there were lots of projects that were happening. There were lots of projects that were happening. And I'll never forget, people were like, hey, so what do you want to do with this? You know, we've been working on this for a couple of years, or doing this or doing this. And I was like, well, what was the vision? If there's no vision that's anchored in reality, then and we're not letting people shine, we're not putting people sort of in the front, we're not empowering people to make choices, then what ends up happening is that those projects go away. Those initiatives go away when they're not really sustainable. And it is our collective strength that helps us work better. It's that collective that in sharing the load helps build the competencies in areas where growth is needed. And, you know, I talked in the prior slide about being exhausted, right? One of the things that I know is I go to team members all the time and say, man, that's a really great initiative. I'm so glad we were able to get that done. And then they'll say, oh, but what about this? We could do one more thing. And I'll say, you know what? I don't have the energy to sort of carry this on. But if you want to, it's a great idea. I am so happy to make sure you have the resources to carry this work forward, but it doesn't mean that I have to be there as the formal leader. I can't be in every room. And so it's really important that we share the load and that we put people in front. We build competencies. We build the organizational capacity for leadership, for teamwork. We're almost done. Geese maintain priorities. They stay committed to the team and their purpose. Their migration routes don't change. They use the same route year after year, even when flock members change. The lesson here, stay true to your team's core values and purpose. Strategies, tactics, products, and even people change in the organization. But for the organization to remain agile, great teams must stick with their core values and preserve them with pride. Right? In the Department of Family Services, we are lucky to have mandated services that center us. We have laws and policies from the federal and state governments that say, these are the things that you must do. It helps ground us. But what we value is our approach. What we value is sort of our mission. And we center ourselves on that strategically to make sure that our mandated and our non-mandated services are centered in what we do. It's important that we have to keep our eye on the prize, right? Because if we start straying from our direction, then we're starting to try to do everything for all people all the time. You know, we have to ask ourselves, is this initiative that someone wants to bring related to our values? Is it related to our core mission? It gives us the opportunity to say, yes, wow, that's great, a great addition, or gives us permission to say no. Wow, that's a really great idea that you have to sort of bring sort of X, Y, and Z resources to the department, but this is not the right time because it doesn't align with who we are and where we are strategically. We got one more. I think that's it. So those are sort of like the lessons some of the lessons that I think we can learn from Geese, especially around leadership and teamwork. But what I encourage you to do is, as you are walking through your life, and I say this all the time, I actually said it to the CEO of a company that I'm meeting with tomorrow about some changes that we're making. as you are walking through life, I'd like for you to examine what it is that we might need to change and how we do it together so that we remain mission focused in this particular program area. The lessons are not in our head. The lessons are all around us, in others, in collaboration, in partnership with others. And so I encourage you, the next time you see a gaggle of geese hanging around your office building, your house, at a park, and you step in their midst, remember that that you have intersected with them on their journey, and they have intersected with you on yours. And that while we can be frustrated about their presence, we can be frustrated about sort of the noise they make, that I would really appreciate if you could take a moment and realize that even when it's not the most pleasant situation, that there are things that we can learn from them. Thank you so much.